In this video, I'll talk about the rhyme scheme, literary and historical context in Dover Beach. Rhyme scheme. Like other aspects of its form, the rhyme scheme in Dover Beach is erratic and unpredictable. It can't quite be said that there isn't a rhyme scheme. Lines certainly do rhyme strongly, but they don't settle into an overall pattern. For instance, technically speaking, the rhymes for the first stanza go as follows: A B A C B B B C E F C G F G. Every line rhymes with some other line in the stanza, but there doesn't seem to be an actual pattern of which line matches with which other line. The rhyme scheme of the poem then creates a conflict between order and disorder, pattern and chaos. This confusion represents the speaker's psyche, which shows itself in tones that are sometimes measured, that is, the opening of the first stanza, and at other times panicked. Example, the opening of the final stanza. The speaker wants the world to make sense and feels that religion once fulfilled this role. Now, however, with faith in retreat before the learnings of science, the speaker fears the future and its potential chaos. Reflecting the speaker's concerns, the use of rhyme occupies a similar transitional space. The rhymes are there, playing on the ear's recognition of pattern, but they don't fall into order. One particular moment worth mentioning is in the final two lines of the poem. Here, the reader encounters the poem's only true couplet as the speaker rhymes flight with night. The sudden use of a couplet lends the lines a sense of finality and helps the poem end on a deep sense of uncertainty. Both words have negative associations and, in a way, defeat the same rhyme from line 33. Light by coming as a pair, flight speaks to fear, and night speaks to the loss of divine guidance. Speaker. The speaker in the poem is often equated with Matthew Arnold, though the poet certainly shared the speaker's concerns with the loss of religious faith. There isn't enough in the poem to say that the speaker is Arnold, but it is fair to say that they at the very least have plenty in common. In a sense, the poem is a journey through the speaker's mind. At the beginning, it almost feels like the speaker is trying to write an entirely different poem, one which praises nature, a kind of night-time pastoral using distant descriptive language. But as the speaker looks and listens a little closer, suddenly everything changes. The speaker becomes overwhelmed by the eternal note of sadness that seems to linger in the sound of the sea, lapping over the pebbles of the beach. The poem then becomes a mental journey through the speaker's psyche. Stanza 2 gives the reader further insight into the speaker's intellectual perspective. The way in which the speaker suddenly thinks of Sophocles suggests that the speaker is an educated person. The classical allusion doesn't seem forced, but rather seems to have occurred quite logically according to the speaker's inner mentality. Stanza 3 demonstrates that the speaker is also deeply religious and that the speaker fears society's loss of faith. Perhaps, too, there is a sense that the speaker's own faith is diminishing or even already gone. For the speaker, this change leaves the world vulnerable and confusing. Without the light of God, the world will be left naked and exposed. Stanza 4 represents the speaker's take on the future. Without faith, the speaker sees the world as a land of dreams, that is, an illusion. It contains none of which is what is supposed to make life worth living, joy, love, beauty, because there is no longer spiritual certainty. This lack of certainty destabilizes man's place in the world, and this is why the speaker hears sadness, not beauty, in the sea. Finally, it's important to note that the speaker is not alone. Rather, the speaker is a companion, just off stage, off page, who never speaks. Three times in the poem, though the speaker directly addresses this companion, the last of these is the most telling. Lines 29 to 30 show that the speaker believes that love might provide a solution to the problem of the loss of faith, but that only a love that is authentic and true can hope to fill the gap created by a loss of faith. Setting. The setting for the poem is twofold. First, there is a literal setting as suggested by the title Dover Beach. Dover is on the southeastern coast of England and is a major port. The cliffs that the speaker mentions are largely chalk, meaning that they are white, which is what makes them glimmer in the moonlight. They also have a sheer drop, with the coastline ending abruptly and giving way to the sea. The sea that the speaker looks out upon is the English Channel, which divides England from France, which is why the speaker can initially see France across the water. The setting also embodies the speaker's psychological conflict that develops throughout the poem. The scene is outwardly beautiful, the cliffs are very impressive, but there is also a sense of great threat because England is an island nation. Anyone wanting to attack it before the time of air travel would have to arrive by sea and land at the coast. The beach itself is a transitional space, that is, while to the casual observer a beach might look the same from one year to the next, it is constantly undergoing change. Subtle differences are made each time the waves come in and recede. Likewise, the beach is the point where land meets the sea. It is a kind of in-between zone at which it is difficult to say where land ends and sea begins. This is important to the poem because the speaker is expressing worry about a similarly transitional moment in history. As the speaker sees it, society and perhaps humankind more generally is moving from faith to a science-based understanding of the world. The intellectual and spiritual life of the world is in transition. The transitional nature of the beach therefore makes the speaker think more deeply about faith and change and loss and love. With that in mind, then, there is another sense in which the poem's setting is the speaker's psyche itself. The reader goes along on the speaker's mental journey, from calmness to doubt to love for another to sadness and worry for the future. Literary context. Dover Beach was first published in 1867, though it is generally believed to have been written around the time of Matthew Arnold's honeymoon in 1851. It is a standout poem in the Victorian canon and often claimed to be the greatest poem of the era. Partly this is because it is so different from the other poetry of its day. Poets like Alfred Lord Tennyson, the poet laureate of England, and Robert Browning wrote with strict formality and did much of Arnold's other poetry is similar to theirs. But this poem stands out in its refusal to settle down into a reliable shape or pattern. In this sense, the poem is a precursor to literary movements of the 20th century, to the innovations of modernism, and in its plot psychology, the spiritual doubt of existentialism. Thomas Hardy's poetry probably comes closest to expressing similar concerns, in particular the close look at the fading of faith in the blinding light of scientific advancement. Another useful comparison is with William Wordsworth's poem, Tintern Abbey. In that poem, the natural environment provides the speaker with a sense of tranquil restoration, in keeping with the generally positive associations of nature in romantic poetry. In Arnold's poem, the sea does the opposite, ushering in a sense of deep, even eternal sadness and melancholy. Historical context. Though the poem never explicitly mentions its historical context, apart from the vague reference to a prior era in which the sea of faith was abundant, most critics argue that the particular intellectual, spiritual, and social moment in which it was written is key to its understanding. The poem expresses fear and anxiety about the loss of faith, and the historical context explains where this comes from. The 19th century in England was a time of significant changes in the way humankind saw itself in the world. For example, Charles Lilly's innovations in the study of zoology had suddenly cast an almost undeniable doubt over the alleged timescales of the world's creation as described by the Bible. Similarly, Mary Anning, known as the Fossil Lady, had made discoveries of bizarre skeletons in the beach areas of southern England, which, like the poem's geographical position, look out over the English Channel, adding to that sense of doubt. Advances in evolutionary biology had unsettled the idea of man as the center of the universe created by God. In summary, Arnold was writing in a time of large-scale readjustment and anxiety. The poem gives expression to this mindset, enabling on a fearful note about what the future holds. Thank you.